All right, good morning, everyone in our Facebook group, Lupon ng WomboXCombo. We have a special Sandata 1v1 today. Joining me on this interview, if you've been a fan of Chinese Dota, if you've been watching events in the English broadcast, you may have seen him translate some of the more laconic phrases from our Chinese professionals. He is an analyst, writer, podcaster, interpreter. I'm reading this off of Liquidpedia, by the way. You have a lot of titles attached to your name here. He is Jack KBBQ Dota Chen, Chinese interpreter for all things Dota. Welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Thanks, man. Good to be here. Just unwinding a little bit after DAC. Pretty solid tournament. A lot of stuff happened. So.
Right. So right now you're still in Shanghai, right?
Yeah. Gonna be probably traveling quite a bit over the course of the next month, beginning with Kiev. So I've been in Shanghai for a little bit, and I might be here a little while longer. But who knows? In a few months, be traveling a lot. So that'll be fun.
Right, and so today we kind of want to introduce you a little bit because sometimes interpreters, they don't really get a lot of information out there for fans. But I have followed your work for a while now. You started out, I think, in the Dota scene as a writer for various publications, Evil Geniuses and a Dota. But I think for most people, they would know you from Defense of the Patience, the podcast. So tell us something a little bit about how you got started in esports.
Well, in terms of the writing and stuff, I wouldn't say that I was really like a dedicated or full-time or anything like that, because back in the day and even now, it's hard to kind of get these sustainable positions in esports. For the most part, even media and stuff for esports, especially for Dota, it was a situation where you had people just mostly as volunteers because they loved the game, so they'd be spending their time writing stuff. I was in that position because I was doing other things at the time, and I always liked Dota, so I'd write an article once in a while, maybe about a TI. For EG, maybe I'd just write about the team a little bit here and there. So that's basically how it started. I'm pretty lucky, I guess, to be able to get to my first event, which happened to be in New York, where I lived and grew up. And then beyond that, I guess just kept going to events, and the other stuff like podcasting and stuff. I felt that I wanted to do some interviews and talk to some of the players, and get a chance to work with them. And through other coverage, I felt like there was more there that could be helpful to the community and something that I really like to do. So while I was stateside, I did that for a couple months on Defense Patience, and it was a lot of fun. And we got to talk to some interesting people, hear some real good perspectives on stuff.
Right. There was an interesting thing you brought up there, like the entire. I feel like this is a question that comes up every now and then when we're talking about esports. It's how to get in. Like how to get in. And right now, you're in a position where you're a translator at these high-profile events. Looking at where your career is now, what would you say is, the Jack Chen advice on how to get into esports, especially now that it's blowing up, right? It's bigger than it was like 2, even 3 years ago.
It's kind of unthinkable, actually, that I would be giving advice to anybody on this one. I'm basically just in the door myself. And we'll talk about this, but in a kind of hard to sustain position myself. But I think mainly when you have an industry that's growing rapidly like this, you want to get in on the ground floor. You either need to be connected in some sense, or you need to do something very unique that other people can't do, because there's a lot of people who want to get in, right? And a lot of people who have similar overlapping skill sets. So just distinguish yourself. If you don't already know somebody who can really help you out, then you have to do something different. And in that sense, I guess there aren't that many interpreters out there. There are a lot of people who can speak, say, Chinese and English or any other combination of languages, Russian also being a big one, very well. But for the most part, you kind of need a little bit more specialized Dota knowledge. You can't really pretend to not like the game or not love the game and have some of that knowledge and information and stuff. So you need that. And then the other part, which we'll get into, is so you gotta have to have this kind of thing that stands out a little bit, and then you have to have an opportunity to go out there and do your thing, I guess. So it's hard. It takes a lot of luck and circumstance, and I've certainly been very fortunate.
Right. I think one of the things that sort of struck me with just following where you've been so far is it's the fact that you did build that specialized skill set that you could offer, and like you said, there are people who can speak Chinese and there are people who can speak English, but what special skill does it take to be an interpreter, right? Because it feels like it isn't as simple as being able to speak two languages.
Well, some of it, honestly, when I first started doing it, you get really nervous about stuff, right? Like it's not just speaking both languages. It's different when you're doing, say, an off-camera interview or something where you can take maybe multiple takes in case something is wrong, or you get a chance to explain stuff or ask more questions. When you have to do it live or say on camera or something like that, you kind of just you're going to be nervous, you're going to be antsy, but you kind of just have to do it at some point, right? You kind of just have to see like if you can do it or not, and that's what it comes down to. If you've been prepared with this kind of, say, I don't know, theater or some kind of stage thing, which doesn't require that much of as an interpreter, that obviously helps. But other than that, you just have to do it. And for me, some of the big influence, I learned a lot from the people who came before me. Like people like Helen, who's now the manager of NP. Josh, who's been in the scene for a while. Like I would look at their interviews and stuff and just get a grasp for how they did things, and you just, I don't know, you learn from what exists. And in new industries, there's often not a lot of things that are there for you to learn from because it's kind of new ground, right? And that's basically all you can do. Just be as prepared as possible, and obviously, like for interpreters and translators, you'll have like a study sheet. Most likely with terms and things, and just in case you're not sure, you'll always want to be doing research and looking things up, and you'll want to figure out local ways of saying stuff too, because every region has its slang for heroes and items and stuff like that. And it's a big world when you get into something specialized like that, and just dive in and do your best, I guess.
Right. So that I really like that. That sort of thread that you went on there. Every region has its own like slang, how they call certain heroes. I know for the Philippines, for example, the player Boboka from IG, excellent player, probably the MVP of DAC. His name means something different in the Philippines. I don't know if you're aware.
I am not.
All right, so Boboka in the Philippines means stupid. Like you're stupid, like it's a curse. Like Bobo means stupid, and Ka is like you. So you're calling out someone as being stupid. So I'm telling you right now, Manila Masters IG is coming. That place is gonna erupt. So I want to ask you though, what are some of the more interesting or funny slang that the Chinese community has for some Dota terms?
Well, just right off the bat, the thing that struck me about the Chinese Dota terms, a lot of it comes from Dota 1. You have this player base and these people who often played since Dota 1, they just have this huge love for the game, and all those things just transferred over from Dota 1 stuff. I think one of the more interesting ones, actually, I like is, so a term for power treads is kind of like, it translates literally to kind of like false shoes in the sense that you can like keep switching it. So what people would say is when Chinese players, they often retire maybe for a little bit and then come back, or they go stream for a little bit, is that they switch their treads. They switch treads to like a different mode.
Right, because they're not proing it now, they're streamers now.
Now they're in streaming mode, or now they're back playing, stuff like that. So I find stuff like that to be pretty interesting. And the rest, I mean, there's so much, it's hard for me to just, pick one or two, but from names for heroes, sometimes when they translate the names to English, it sounds kind of extremely simple, but it's like, it just makes more sense in Chinese. I don't know how to say it, but like heroes like Pit Lord being called Underlord, being called Big Ass or Big Butt or something like that. I think that's it's great. It's great. I like that stuff.
It is. Yeah, I think the common thing between the Philippines and China in that respect is that, like we were talking before the show, the Philippines really does have a big connection with Dota 1, and so even when you get to Dota 2. A lot of the old names get used to, like it's still Priestess of the Moon for some people. It's still, we call Templar Assassin Lanaya. The English the names in the XP counter before for Dota 1. So I wanna
English. Like we always say Furion for Nature's
Prophet. Furion, definitely.
Nobody ever says
Nobody ever calls it Nature's Prophet, or you just call it Bulldog or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. So I love that kind of stuff, but right now, what I wanted to sort of transition into now is, so you're back from DAC. Excellent event. We enjoyed watching it, especially because it's in the same time, time zone for us in the Philippines. Usually when we watch something in Europe, it fucks with my sleep pattern. So I want to ask you, what are some interesting backstage stories from DAC? Like anything interesting happening out off stream, or anything that's memorable to you from the event?
I've got to think about what I can. There's always a lot of stuff going on under the surface, as you can imagine with everything, and backstage stories, man.
Or anything interesting at all that wasn't necessarily caught in front of the camera, but is funny or interesting to you?
One thing that's been interesting since I've been going to events is that generally speaking, the Chinese always want Chinese food regardless, and then the Westerners always want Western food for the most part.
Right.
So one thing that the Western talent and stuff have really started to like at every Chinese event is bubble tea, and I don't know if bubble tea is big over in the Philippines. Yeah.
Oh, it is. I'm going out to get one after this.
Oh, nice. Boba, but not Bobo.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so that's something that like everybody usually, well, not everybody, but most people like some bubble tea, and we'll order that stuff at events, even if the food and stuff is all right and we like it. Everybody will get bubble tea and stuff like that. In terms of other stories, well, a lot of it is just, I don't know. There's a lot of there's some pretty good camaraderie and a lot of jokes and a lot of back and forth at each other. That's kind of just something that when you spend all day around each other, you're gonna have stuff like that. So that's a lot of fun, but nothing that I can really point to as a story. Maybe I think of something and bring it up later.
Right. Yeah. It's no problem. So for everyone who was just listening to that, Manila Masters coming up. These talents are gonna be here. Players are gonna be here. Bring bubble tea into the Mall of Asia Arena, and you can chat Jack Chen up. Just offer him boba. All right. So. DAC concluded. IG won. It was an amazing event. I know Skim from DOTA Buff is very, very pleased that IG won. I wanted to ask you, as someone who follows the Chinese scene very, very intensely, what do you think, in your estimation, what made China sort of bounce back this season? I know that since around Shanghai, the Chinese, the term Chinese Dota sort of was in decline. Obviously, Wings won the event, but I think Chinese Dota as a whole, people were saying that, there's a problem here. So what do you think made the China bounce back this patch?
I think China has had a bit of, I don't know how to say this, but there's been a lot of issues with turning its huge player base and tremendous amount of talent into international results. There's a lot of factors, a lot of parts that go into that, but this time around, I think you look at the success that this IG team has had, and IGV, even the organization has had in recent months. Every organization has kind of different features and philosophies in terms of the big clubs and teams. For IG specifically, I mean they've been pretty consistent. IGV has been basically the same roster since before TI6. Right. They did okay at the qualifiers. Decided not to switch things up, and they've had some trouble on LAN, in terms of communication, in terms of being consistent. But there's this patience from them, where it's we're not going to just go out there and just pick up as many new star players as possible and throw them together and expect them to achieve. So with IGV, that's a certain model. Everything from the way the teams train to how much they expose themselves to outside factors, because I don't know if this is the case in the Philippines, and it's certainly not the case, I think, in most Western countries. But the esports scene in Shanghai, the center of it, this esports scene in China, the center of it is Shanghai. Right. And so everybody is in one place, and that could be good and bad. Everyone just hanging out together, and the circle and stuff. So I think IG has done a good job mitigating some of that in terms of their team with Burning and Kiwi. It's a mixture of young players that have been in the organization for a long time, because these guys used to be on IGV. There are other players, XSS, Boboka, and OP. So they used to be on IGV. They've played in the organization for a long time. And then with the veteran players they have coming in, relatively veteran, Q and Burning, Burning has had maybe the highest reputation and following in China of any player. He's remained consistent in terms of trying and like staying committed to the game. Their manager they brought in was actually Wing's manager last year when they won the championship.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that guy was known. So yeah, he was at ESL One Manila when they won as well. And
yeah, it's a great guy. Speaks excellent English. Yeah,
that guy was respected as a Dota side manager in the sense that some managers maybe focus more on other things. Some managers are all about the game, and he came from a media background as well. So in terms of what the organization has done, I think they've done a good job of putting themselves in a position to succeed. And IG specifically, they've just been on a roll since this recent patch. They've been pretty much unstoppable, and that continued through this tournament. And you could see they did very well in a very difficult Group B. So yeah, I just gave you a lot of stuff there, but
yeah, I know we're gonna unpack them a little bit here. So I think where I want to start to sort of unpack that is the XXS, Boboka, and OP story. So Anthony Hodgson Scanzer was on Twitter, and we were discussing this a little bit, personally in private messages, and he was saying that every time on the English broadcast, people would be saying IG is winning because of burning this, burning that, but to him, the bigger story there is that IG's core at its core is that it has XXS, Boboka, and OP who have been playing together for years. So from your end, as someone who because I've also seen you tweet, that Boboka has this sort of nickname among Chinese fans. What do you can you describe in your own terms, like what has been XXS and Boboka's story, or together with OP, before they got into this sort of IG configuration? Like, how are they viewed in China? How did other players in China view them before they got into this team?
Well, they were on IGV together. There was a time when IGV and IG basically swapped rosters, so they were already on IGV. So they played together before. In terms of Boboka, I mean, I think he's one of the rising stars of this tournament for sure. Fans will joke that he's the real B-God on this team.
Yeah.
In spite of Burning being there.
B-God needed B-God to win.
The three, when they're playing well, the synergy that they have it's very noticeable in terms of not just picks, but really this isn't talked about as much in the Western scene, but I'm sure there's a concept of it. But this concept in Chinese of kind of like, the word is jitsu, so it's kind of like tempo or rhythm. It's kind of in terms of like you're dictating the pace of the game, where like they have to react to you. And those three do a great job of that when you see them play together. Like, not so much just individual performances, whether it's XXS on Magnus or some of his signature, or Legion Commander, which they've paired constantly with like Mia or someone else. Boboka's roaming, and then OP kind of contributing to that, whether it's Lina or whatever hero that he's playing, and just being able to like back them up when they want to make things happen, when they want to start trouble somewhere. There's kind of a synergy and chemistry there, and it's starting to become a thing where in Dota it's not so much necessarily about the individual skill or even the stars that you have. It's I think Wings proved that last year. Like, who were these guys? None of these guys had ever played at a TI before, right?
Right.
But three of them, actually in a kind of a similar way, three of them had played together on Speed Gaming for a long time. They played together for like years, basically. So, another one of those things where they trust each other to develop that kind of chemistry, and it starts to be greater than whatever you can, like mixing people. And then some people you probably can't develop that with because you just don't see eye to eye on the game. You have different philosophies. It's hard. And so for these three, they've been together. They've clearly gelled. Q has a pretty respected drafter, I think, for a while, and Burning has also picked it up a lot recently. Like, he's been pretty consistent. And so with those three, kind of, it feels like controlling the match, just like taking good fights, putting pressure, making the space that they need to. With Burning steady play, I think that's made a great recipe for success for them. And if you look at drafts and stuff, there isn't even necessarily that much diversity. It's just that they've been executing so well.
Right. I think that was the story. At least one of the stories in that finals match was people were praising OG's drafting, Fly's depth of drafting, not necessarily his drafts. In particular, I know PPD has some very strong opinions about Fly's drafts, but at the same time, they had what people would say is a deeper sort of strategies to pull up from. But IG just did the same thing over and over again. It's just that they were much better at it. So going to that, I wanted to ask you your sort of your opinion and sort of the opinion. What is the opinion of the Chinese community now with Burning? So as you said a while ago, he is still one of those legendary players. He is probably the most acclaimed player in China, as you say. But there did come a time when he declined. There was that time after DK when he said that he wasn't going to play anymore, and then he went back again, and then he went support. Much that it pains me because I'm a DK fan. Just hurt me to my soul. What would you say it has been his story in China from that point to now?
The most interesting thing is I think two of the most popular and acclaimed players in China, the R&B duo they sometimes cast, they did last year as well when neither made TI. RTK and Burning is neither players have won a TI, but they're still, I think, far and away the most popular active players in the scene, and kind of for different reasons. There's a certain charisma, a certain way that they present themselves. RTK is a lot more outgoing. He's a showman. He's a real showman, which is rare within the Chinese scene and just rare in general for someone to be a good showman in addition to having leadership and those other qualities as a player. And then Burning, Burning is a bit more detached, a bit more, kind of devil. He has this kind of devil-may-care attitude that I think people like. Right.
He's very anime good-looking guy. He's very aloof.
I don't think he got the same. The level of respect for Burning is a little different. I feel like Burning has reached an untouchable tier among Chinese fans, where it's kind of like you can't really say anything about him without just getting flamed or getting torn to pieces. ROTK for a stretch when he was I think on LGD last year, he wasn't playing well, and fans did go after him a bit because they're like, maybe it's time, maybe you're past your time and it's time to step down. But he stuck with it, and recently, he's been part of a bit of a resurgence for himself and for his team and for VJ. So the perception is that he's still the Emperor. Like, they name him the Emperor for a reason. He's kind of the untouchable number one in Chinese Dota. Even if he's not playing well, the level of support that he has. Last year at the TI qualifiers, the number of people, the fans who came just to watch, like I believe it was VG at the time, and the Burning Legion and stuff. Yeah, they're all there. So Burning is a god in Chinese Dota and remains so, and he's gotten the Chinese a championship on home soil, which I don't think they've won in a long time. I think for Chinese tournaments, MDL's Star
MDL was the last one,
DAC, it's been a while. Yeah, MDL eHome last year was like the last one, right? So. Right.
And I believe for Burning, his last major title, not counting Star Ladder 9, was actual the DPC, the 4-3 reverse sweep against IG.
Okay, that's a long time ago. That's a DK.
That is a DK era.
That's almost 3 years ago, right?
Yes, it is definitely. Yeah. So it has to be. Have you spoken with the IG team, with Burning in particular? Because I know one of the storylines that I think the most of the world outside of China were following was that Burning is just so torn up, not having won a championship. Like, I remember there was a Valve documentary where he was just like crouching, saying like, maybe I am not meant to win championships. So how is he feeling now? Have you had the chance to talk to him after DAC?
No, I haven't really spoken to him or the team. They have to, they've got to go and celebrate stuff, and then they also have to play because it's a very crowded schedule right now. So there's other tournaments and qualifiers that they've got to play in or get sorted out. So not a lot of time to really just totally celebrate and unwind. But I mean, he's got to be elated. You saw some of the managers, some of the people were just crying. I think 430 broke down, and so it's a very emotional moment for them. I mean, they've you have themes of they beat these like the super strong untouchable foreign team. They defended home soil in a sense, and then it's a championship for. I mean, really, in terms of a storyline, a storybook kind of finish to the event or winning the event, it doesn't really top that.
Right. So from there, I want to sort of leapfrog into the bigger Chinese scene, right? So We talked about DAC. We talked about the IG team and what their win meant for them. But I sort of wanted to touch on what the win means for China as a whole. And I want to start it off by asking, was the post-Shanghai backlash, the fallout from the Shanghai Major, if people don't remember, just Google Shanghai Major. It has won awards for being the worst last year. How did Chinese fans feel about the Shanghai Major, first and foremost?
I think they're okay. Well, there's a lot of different opinions on. Obviously, they were very disappointed. And for people who have this kind of very nationalistic pride in Dota, it was like it was embarrassing, right? Everybody finished in the bottom half. And I think every team basically finished in the bottom half, and they were all gone. And that, coupled with the event itself, wasn't good for the fans. It was this kind of sense of it added to this kind of story of where like Chinese Dota was kind of on the decline. Whether it's conflicting incentives for players and teams, whether it's whatever management issues were going on, whether there's a problem transitioning what I said before, the Chinese talent into becoming successful world-class teams. That the fact that the Chinese hadn't really had a period of success for a while, I think that was before the Wings win, and then obviously the previous TI champion at the time of that major was Newbie, and that was like almost 2 years ago by that point.
Right.
So you saw this kind of cycle of decline a little bit in the Chinese scene, and so fans weren't happy about that. The timing of that major was also it's not very good for Chinese teams because with the Chinese New Year, traditionally speaking, that's kind of a period of like reshuffling and player contracts coming up. It's also a period where like teams have to rest and go home. Like Chinese New Year is like it's a holiday for everybody, pretty much no matter what. So it's hard for teams to get into form. Those conditions. So depending on where you stood as a fan, you could either be more or less understanding of that. You could say, well, we'll be all right. We'll pick things up for TI. This is just a badly timed major for us. Or you could say this is just a symptom of like our general decline. Like we can't even defend our home soil at all. We can't even put up like a respectable showing. None of our teams look like they're on the same tier as everybody else. So I think there was some turmoil and some urgency there, and some of the concerns were real, and I think some of them still exist because, just objectively speaking, given the number of people in China who play Dota, who love the game, and all that stuff, it really shouldn't be that difficult to get some good teams out there.
Right. I wanted to ask you a little bit about streaming contracts in China. I'm going to set this up for our audience because they might not know. So in China, I know that there are a bunch of other streaming platforms. It isn't Twitch. There's a bunch of them out there. And the salaries, or at least the revenue that a person might get from just streaming, and then the sponsorships and the partnerships, can get very, very lucrative. For our Filipino audience out there, it's like Twitch paying you to stream, and at the same time, you're getting much of the revenue if someone donates to you, or like that. So I know that a lot of Chinese players, good ones, turn to streaming instead of becoming pro. Is it still that big of a problem right now? Because I know it was a problem for some League of Legends teams a year ago or even 2 years ago. So is it the same in Dota?
So obviously, whether it's a problem depends on your perspective, right? I think as a fan, you ideally want players to be fully committed to their teams, and you want to see them perform at the absolute best. As a player, it becomes it is really in China, maybe more than other places, become a real issue of conflict of incentives, conflict of interest potentially. If you're getting paid a huge amount to stream, and you're getting paid much less as as someone on a team for a team contract or whatever else, then that creates a bit of a difference, right? You want to make sure that you meet your streamers' like requirements and the things that they want from you, because that is a big source of income and it's consistent, almost regardless of how you do in tournaments and things like that, which aren't entirely in your control necessarily. So, in terms of, I think teams started to realize this, and they made some adjustments to kind of change some of the incentives, or maybe how they treated the players as well. I think to balance things out a little bit. But it has been a real issue that has maybe hurt some teams or players in terms of team performance. But it's really just about the incentives, right? It's if you're a if you're a professional player or anybody, like, you got into it because you love the game and because you just played it every day and you were successful and good at it. But at some point, you got to think about other things as well. And maybe, how many years am I going to play this game if you're a professional? What can I get out of this game? If I'm done with this game, what am I going to do afterwards? How do I secure the best possible position for myself if I'm thinking as a player? And so you have to look at all these factors.
All right. So we're going to go into our sort of last round of questions for this interview. And I want to start it off with a question about Chinese orgs and the players when it comes to in front of the camera. So I think for a lot of fans, it can kind of come as Chinese players are a bit shy. They don't tend to share a lot. As an interviewer, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with a Chinese pro player? How do you get the best out of them so that they become more relatable to someone watching at home?
Well, one part of it is really just building these kind of trust and relationships. Once they get to know you a little bit, or once you talk to them, and that's kind of smooth things out. That's that really helps to like break down the gap a little bit. They feel a little bit more comfortable. But there's some things that are just difficult, and there may be cultural things to begin with. You have to remember that the entertainment culture, or the culture in terms of presenting yourself or being a public speaker, is different in some countries. It's different in China than, say, how I grew up in the United States, or maybe how it is in the Philippines. I wouldn't be able to speak on that. And so the relationship of player to being on camera, to how they present themselves to the outside world, and to the feedback that they get. If you're talking about people who, say, have a lot of fans or streamers, and maybe they're very careful about what they say because, people will flame them or get upset at them if they say anything that's, or maybe the culture is just generally less accepting of people who are extremely outgoing and just say whatever they want. There's a certain respect for that in some places. Other places it's kind of frowned upon. So all of those factors just weigh in, and I think once you build that trust, and once the players start to maybe either understand the relationship of say interviews or see how it can help them, that's a big part of it too. Because a lot of players, to them, it's like their whole lives they've dedicated to Dota or this game. What they get out of it is from playing the game and doing it well. It's not from necessarily saying much on camera or being presentable.
It is an exposure, right?
Yeah, and I've seen some players very noticeably, I think, have changed in this department. I think this is not a Chinese player, but Miracle, I think he's gotten a lot more comfortable on camera and speaking out. I think he might have been, again, like worried or concerned at first, but over the last few interviews, over SLI, over the course of DAC, you can tell that he's like, he's opened up more. He's like, hey, this is all right. I can present myself to the world, and it can be fun. And ROTK, obviously I mentioned, he's a showman. Like, he is very good at understanding that dynamic and knowing that it can help him and doing his best with it. But some players, it takes a little bit more time or a little bit more perspective in some cases, where they have to think, well, if I do well on camera and present myself well, that can help me and my team, versus just it's an obligation. I got to go out there and say a few words because they got me out here.
Right. So after this event, next big LAN is going to be Kiev. You're going, right? All right. So you'll be there. What are your sort of fearless predictions? How do you think? Any favorites coming into the tournament? Anyone we need to look out for in the qualifiers or whatever? Oh, well, not the qualifiers. The qualifiers are done. I mean, with the team lineups there.
A lot of these things are kind of cyclical, where like a team will struggle, and maybe a top team will get a sense that they need to like pick things up or change things a little bit. So I expect the Western teams to come back very strong in Kiev. I think that OG, for instance, maybe their group wasn't as challenging as the other group, and maybe it they had a different view of the game, but maybe that'll change things up for them.
You mean Visage? They had a Visage view of the game.
Yeah, I think EG, I would expect to bounce back strong and maybe take this one a little bit differently in terms of a lot of teams I think are going to be together in Europe for a while before the tournament too, so they're going to get to play together. I expect the Western teams to bounce back, and for the Chinese, I mean, IG still looks very strong, but IG is in a situation where people are going to be focusing on them now. They're kind of maybe surprised to some people, to some observers coming into this tournament. That's not going to be the case for Kiev.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So I'm going to give you an interesting sort of pseudo statistic that's thrown around in the Philippines. So TNC has reportedly never lost to a Chinese team. They've always lost to European teams, OG being the particular ones to knock them out. especially after TI6. So what is the perception, or at least as an analyst as yourself, I want to enter this in sort of two directions. What is the perception of Chinese fans about a team like TNC or SEA teams in general, and what do you think are the chances of TNC coming into Kiev?
I think as far as I've heard, the perception is so the Chinese considered themselves in a sense the center of the Dota world as others with other things historically. It was kind of like, who are we to go and learn or look at these other teams? As long as we get some time to prepare and play, we can beat anybody. And there may be times where that was true, but I feel generally speaking that's kind of an attitude that's held towards SEA. It's kind of like, hey, the top SEA team or some of the top SEA teams have players that played in China and then they, didn't stay in China or went somewhere else. Or these SEA guys play an entertaining style of Dota, but I'm not sure if they can, like hang with us down the road. And obviously that's been proven to be wrong. So there's a bit of hubris there, I think, that needs to be addressed. TNC specifically, I mean, there's a couple of very strong heroes, like whether it's Tim's Earth Spirit or Raven's pool of carries that he plays very well that people respect. But for the most part, I think they're still underestimated in China. It's still kind of like, we'll see how they do, but this region is still, just okay. And so I think for TNC, I mean, they've seen TNC beat Chinese teams and come to Chinese events and do pretty well. And so the respect should be there for them. But I think for the most part, they're going to focus on the higher name Western teams. And that gives a team like TNC a chance to really surprise people. And, they're legitimate. So.
All right. So we're going to wrap this up by asking you, Jack, what's up next for you? I mean, I know you're going to Kiev and Manila Masters, you mentioned, but I know you're also starting with Beyond the Seven. You've joined their broadcast. How's that like?
It's been good. It's been good. I've been in China for the most part, and trying to get a feel for things out here and keep my ear to the ground here. It's been a lot of fun. The BTS guys are great. And you're talking about people like LD and Gods, who are basically pioneers in the scene, started from their own love of the game and being willing to, again, this goes back to what I talked about, being willing to do things that other people aren't or stand out. Like they were casting games from SEA and from China when other people weren't. And it's been just great just working under them and getting to know them and seeing their leadership and their vision for things. So that's been great. It's a good team of, in terms of casters and talent. I mean, it's been wonderful. So it's been a lot of fun. And, BTS is starting to do some other things now as well. So
right. CSGO, Overwatch.
Yeah, we're gonna have summits and content for other stuff. And so people who have come to know BTS and love BTS through Dota can, just as their interests change or other games or games that they're interested in, we're going to be doing stuff for that as well. So hope you guys can check that out. And, we have a certain style of doing things that people like, and I think that'll continue to be the case.
Are we going to see a board game? Because I'm pretty sure that's like a one step away. Like we've had the town, the werewolf LAN. Are we going to see a board game LAN from BTS soon?
Well, now that you suggested it, I'm going to go back.
Damn it! Damn it! Well, I gotta patent that somehow. But yeah, so thank you very much for joining us, Jack. Thanks. Do you have any shout outs before we go?
Well, obviously, shout out to the people back in California, to Gods and LD and all the BTS people that I haven't seen, in person, except I've seen them in person at tournaments recently, but there's a lot of other, a couple other staff and great people out there that I look forward to seeing. Shout out to them. And, I mean, just I don't know, there's just too many people to be thankful to and giving the opportunities that I've had, and just keep working at it and keep helping to connect the Chinese scene with other parts of the world.
All right, so thank you very much, and that was our interview with Jack Chen, KBBQ Dota. You can follow him on Twitter at KBBQ Dota, and I think hold on, wait a minute. Before we go, you are a Chinese interpreter with a name that's KBBQ Dota. What's up with that? Shouldn't it be Boba Tea Dota or something? Come on.
KBBQ. I just love Korean barbecue. I mean, it's so good. It's probably my favorite, just class or type of food. I love Korean food, and so when you're just coming up with a name for a game, and so you're not really thinking too much about stuff like that.
Right. Just food.
Yeah, and then it ends up being kind of simple. And
I should name myself Balut Dota. You've had Balut, right?
I have not had balut.
Okay, we're having that. We're having that when you get over here. We're having boba tea. We're having Korean barbecue, and then we're gonna go for balut.
I've got to prepare for that. That's causing me more anxiety than anything else.
All right. Well, that's it for this interview, guys. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.